If I'm being 100% honest, when I was growing up, I wasn't a very big fan of bourbon. Then one day, somebody gave me my first taste of Buffalo Trace. And today, we're gonna be visiting the Buffalo Trace Distillery. Now, it's still a little bit early, and I've never typically had bourbon for breakfast, so we're gonna kick this morning off with some coffee.
But before we dive in, we'll introduce ourselves. We're Lauren and Daniel, travel addicts, small business owners, and now full-time Airstream dwellers. We're on a mission to visit all 50 states in 365 days, shopping 100% American-made and as locally sourced as possible. It's our hope that as we share our journeys with you, you'll be inspired to wander local too. In the last episode, we explored my hometown of Nashville, Tennessee. Even though we could stay there for weeks, it was time to move on to our next state. And Dee is super excited about this one because he loves a good old-fashioned, and this state is known for bourbon. But before we drink, it's time to drive.
We're all packed up, and we're headed to Kentucky. Woo! This might be my favorite leg of the journey so far. It's 138 miles on the same road. No turns, no worries about roundabouts or anything like that. Just straight to our destination.
Not only that, but as soon as we got to the campground, it was time to celebrate. We got a coveted pull-through spot, making parking the Airstream a breeze. But we promised y'all bourbon after all, so off to Frankfort, Kentucky we go to visit the Buffalo Trace Distillery. It's important to note, make a reservation online a few weeks in advance if you'd like to come visit the distillery. They book out fast. That being said, there are multiple tours. We did the Old Taylor tour so that we could learn more about the father of the modern bourbon industry, Colonel Edmund Haynes Taylor Jr., who was the visionary for this beautiful place. But no matter which tour you do, they all include a tasting at the end, so you can't really go wrong.
1,000 bottles in a minute, 1,000,000 bottles in a minute. Count that people, if something breaks, they can floating break, most likely.
The building we just saw outside was E.H. Taylor's original house. It was built in 1785. Since then, it's been used as a hospital, a lab, and many other things over the years. But, little known fact, it was one of the first buildings, if not the first building, in the entire county. There's a river right outside of these windows, and there are markings on the wall here, and it's never a matter of if the Kentucky River will flood, it's a matter of when. So because of that, they built in these fail-safe mechanisms in the floor here that allow water from the river to flow into the building and then recede over time. Buffalo Trace has the world's largest collection of bourbon aged in barrels. Do you know how many barrels they have just on this property alone? Over 1 million. That's impressive.
So one of my biggest questions in coming here today was, what's the difference between bourbon and whiskey? And what I've always heard is that the difference is that bourbon is made in Kentucky. And apparently about 95+% of it is made in Kentucky, but that's not actually what makes the difference. What it is it's called the ABCs of bourbon. First is A, there are no additives included in bourbon like there are in whiskey, aka coloring, preservatives, etc. B is the barrels. So, unlike other types of distilling, with bourbon, they only use a barrel once. Go figure. Last but not least is C. And what C means is that corn is the main grain that is in bourbon. So, now you know. ABC. Additives, barrels, corn. That's the difference between bourbon and whiskey.
We're wrapping our tour and we're finishing with a tasting. One of the interesting things about this place, I didn't know, they actually make a vodka here. And the difference is that vodka, of course, is not aged in barrels. The barrels are what give bourbon its color. Their vodka, produced on site, is distilled 10 times. So a lot of your entry-level vodkas are produced just a handful of times, with your premiums being distilled maybe 6 or 7 times. So the fact that this is distilled 10 times is impressive. And it makes for a very clean and neat finish. Eagle Rare.
So it's really nice adult root beer. You put orange crush in it, and creamsicle.
Let me preface this by I'm not a bourbon person. Okay, this is the Eagle Rare one.
Eagle to me has a softer touch up front. I like the bigger, bolder, spicier, I think. Yeah. But there's not that much difference. But I think Trace was a bit sweeter. My house.
One of my other favorite things about this tasting is that Lauren doesn't like chocolate. So everybody gets a chocolate. I get 2. The great debate. Is this a pecan on top or a pecan?
It's a pecan.
After the tasting, we headed down to the gift shop to see what kind of goodies we could find.
We hit the gold mine today. We just happened to be on site when they were doing a release of this rare bottle of Blanton's. And this particular bottle was bottled in 9/15 of 2020. I'd call that a win.
The grounds at the distillery are beautiful, so we spent some time simply walking around and exploring before we decided it was time to venture back into town to find sustenance.
What better way to round off the day of a bourbon tour than to finish it off with some vegan pizza?
Cheers! After filling our bellies with Buddy's Pizza, it was time to head back to the Airstream to spend some time with our wonderful friends who decided to come camping with us this weekend. But a day at the distillery would not be complete without Daniel showing you his secret old-fashioned recipe with our score from today.
Despite what we may have thought in college, if the alcohol sucks, there is no amount of additives or ingredients that are going to fix that. So number 1 step, taste your bourbon. I just happened to land a bottle of this Eagle Rare a little bit earlier. This happened to be on the shelves when we visited the Buffalo Trace factory. And I'm super excited to make an old fashioned using Eagle Rare. Perfect. Thing we're gonna do is we're gonna take a cherry and we're gonna muddle it. And these cherries were aged in bourbon from Woodford Reserve, which is also out of Kentucky. Muddler. The next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna choose a bitter. And I've got several here. I've got a chocolate bitter, spiced cherry, another one I think. I'm gonna go with chocolate tonight. Next thing we're gonna do, got this from Pappy and Company. Pappy is made by Buffalo Trace. And this is a cocktail mixer for old fashions. So mix in half a shot of this. The next thing to do is add a couple of shots of bourbon. We're gonna add 2 full shots. As an added bonus, I've never actually seen this before today. They had bourbon barrel-aged pure maple syrup there. So I feel like we've got to give this a little shot of that. That smells so good. All right, so the next thing we're gonna do is grab some ice cubes. If you grab some crushed ice, you've already screwed up. 1 cube, that's it, stop there. I'm just gonna stir a little bit, combine the ingredients. One of the very last steps is an orange peel. And the last time I did this, I took off a piece of my finger. So I've been a little hesitant to do this ever since. And this is the part where I call in a favor from Lauren.
We have a first aid kit like any good camper should, but using it tonight is not really on my list of favorite ideas. So I don't mind subbing in on this one. All you do is, since we're making 2, create 2 little orange peels, and then you twist them. They say that it makes the orange like juice and like stuff come out and make it taste better, but I think they're just pretty. Ta-da!
We're almost done. I've got these skull picks here that I ordered online. Gonna add a cherry. And now the final fun step. Gonna move everything aside here. Get out of the danger zone. My favorite part. I mean, who doesn't like to play with fire in an RV? If there are smoke detectors in here, we're in trouble, but I don't know. Maybe. We'll see. Time for the big reveal. Oh yeah. Check it out.
Okay, so y'all already know that I don't love bourbon anyway, so this isn't my favorite cocktail of choice. By that I mean like I never drink one of these, so I'm keeping my fingers crossed I'm not gonna massively hate it. Because that face I made earlier today was not pretty. Well, it's better than the way it is on its own. But it's very sweet. And I just don't think bourbon is my thing. But I'm gonna celebrate with Daniel anyway. But I like the cherries. Despite my personal distaste for bourbon, our day at the Buffalo Trace Distillery was so much fun. If you get the chance to come to Kentucky, make sure you don't miss it. This American family-owned distillery is a true testament to the spirit of the American dream.